This is KSUT Public Radio. Up next, regional news. Monsoon rains are bringing some much-needed relief for drought conditions across the Rocky Mountains, but if rainfall is intense enough, it presents new challenges for areas burned by recent wildfires. The Rocky Mountain Community Radio Coalition's Carolyn Llanes has the story.
When a wildfire burns, it often removes plants that would have otherwise soaked up rain and changes the soil's ability to absorb moisture. That creates unstable conditions, and the rain can cause debris flows, which carry fast-moving rocks, mud, trees, and other loose material. Erin Walter is the service hydrologist for the National Weather Service's Grand Junction office. She says in recently burned areas, the NWS tends to err on the side of caution when issuing flash flood warnings.
Until we start to see some heavy rain and how that actually reacts, we don't always know the answer because every fire is so unique. Every drainage is different. The vegetation it's burned through is not going to be consistent from fire to fire. So there's still a lot of unknown.
She says there's a chance of above-average precipitation into September for western Colorado and the Mountain West, but warmer temperatures and a dry outlook for fall could mean the region's drought continues. Caroline Llanes, Rocky Mountain Community Radio.
An analysis of federal data shows a 41% rise nationally in emergency room visits due to extreme heat incidents last year. As the Mountain West News Bureau's Yvette Fernandez reports, the issue is hitting vulnerable Americans the hardest.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's data was compiled by Lending Tree. Analyst Divya Sangamashwar found that populations considered socially vulnerable tend to have the most ER visits.
So this category represents people who are facing poverty, people who work in outdoor jobs that expose them to extreme heat, people who are above the age of 65, and people who have chronic illnesses that are worsened by extreme heat.
Every Mountain West state has a vulnerable population, with Utah the lowest at 18% and New Mexico the highest at 32%. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Yvette Fernandez in Las Vegas.
Indigenous communities also faced a jump in emergency room visits. In New Mexico, up by 61%. In Colorado, up by 57%. The Trump administration has restored funding for electric vehicle chargers following a court battle. As the Mountain West News Bureau's Hannah Mersbach reports, new requirements for the stations could help travelers in wide-open spaces.
The $5 billion program used to require high-speed charging stations for every 50 miles on designated highways. But that's often not where tourists are driving, says Alicia Cox, who leads a group promoting EVs in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho.
It's more of a vacation road trip that you're going on. You're not necessarily scooting through just on I-80.
The Trump administration tried to eliminate the program, but lost a legal battle to states, including Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. Now it's giving states more flexibility around where to place stations.
These new guidelines that came out, I think, are going to be easier for the states to work with.
The rollout for the program enacted in 2021 has been relatively slow, but Cox is hopeful more stations will be in the ground soon. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Hannah Mersbach.
State capitals in recent years have seen a flurry of bills to limit the responsibilities of power utilities that spark wildfires. The industry wants that protection, but some lawmakers oppose that. Reporter Cameron Sanchez in Phoenix brings us this feature.
The devastating Camp wildfire in California that killed 85 people 7 years ago and displaced 50,000 marked a change in the industry. It was linked to the state's largest power utility, PG&E, which ultimately went bankrupt from settlements. Since then, bills began cropping up in state legislatures across the West, all striving to limit utilities' liability if they cause wildfires. Eric Gray is Vice President of Government Relations for Edison Electric Institute, which represents all U.S. investor-owned electric companies.
What we're really trying to do is move forward with legislation that really, at the end of the day, protects our customers and really tries to eliminate these just time-consuming and expensive litigation that we're seeing
Our investigation found 18 of the country's 19 westernmost states have seen similar legislation or policy introduced over the past 6 years regarding utility liability and cost management. And in about half of those states, some version of the legislation became law. Each state considered a different version, ranging wildly in the protections utilities were able to secure. In nearly every state, protections are contingent on utilities following a wildfire mitigation plan, including Arizona. State Senator J.D. Mesnard says he wasn't comfortable giving the utilities the provisions they asked for, like blanket liability and banning class action lawsuits.
My approach was, you want high protections, you have to have a high threshold. You want low protections, you have a low threshold. They had low threshold, high protection.
Utilities say they need protection because they're vital to everyday life and don't want the costs of settlements passed on to ratepayers. Barry Aarons represents Arizona trial attorneys. He speculates utilities are really concerned with shareholder exposure.
I really think that it's a little bit disingenuous to throw out, oh my God, we're just concerned about the people of the state and what it's going to do to their utility costs. Well, tell that to a community that burns to the ground.
Utilities argue that they can't control everything, like lightning strikes or overgrown vegetation on federal lands. Wildfire risk is getting worse due to a variety of factors, including prolonged drought, high temperatures, and stormy weather. Our review found utilities were blamed for at least 11 wildfires across the West since 2012 and paid settlements in at least 5 cases, although most of the cases involved denials by utilities. Sierra Club attorney Rose Monahan says utilities are operating with a thumb on the political scale.
If utilities were operating in an open market, they would have the incentive to innovate, to adjust to new market conditions. They wouldn't have the option of saying, can someone just protect me from this and I won't have to deal with this issue?
If there's a wildfire and state legislation protects the utility at fault from liability, then who pays for the damage? In many cases, that would fall to insurance companies, the strongest opposition to utilities' efforts. State Farm insurance lobbyist Greg Van Horsen told Montana legislators expensive settlements would result in raising the price of homeowners insurance.
And if we have a problem with recovering costs for burnt down houses in Montana, from an insurance company's perspective, well, then we only have one option.
Gray with Edison Electric Institute says, although this utility effort started out focused on the West, utilities are now lobbying for protection at the federal level in the wake of fires from New Jersey to Louisiana.
This issue is becoming more and more, relevant for the entire country.
Meanwhile, other cases drag on. For example, Xcel Energy is, quote, prepared to go to trial over liability in the 2021 Marshall Fire, which burned over 1,000 homes in Colorado. Settlements involving thousands of homes across the country are a long way off as states, utilities, and residents argue over who is to blame. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Cameron Sanchez with KJZZ in Phoenix.
Colorado's special legislative session ended yesterday. It was convened to address the impacts from a Republicans' federal tax and spending measure. But as KUNC's Lucas Brady Woods reports, it was also marked by a fight over lawmaker misconduct.
House Democrats introduced a resolution in the final hours of the session condemning former Republican Representative Ryan Armagost for taking a surreptitious photo of a female lawmaker earlier this year. Debate over the measure led to a tense exchange between Democratic and Republican leadership. But the resolution ultimately passed with near-unanimous support. Democrats also passed bills during the session to close most of the nearly $800 million budget gap created by federal tax changes. To make up the rest, the governor's office will propose spending cuts that will go into effect next month. Lawmakers also passed bills to cover food assistance and certain health care services cut by the federal government. An effort to revise the state's AI regulations failed.
That was Lucas Brady Woods reporting for the Colorado Capital News Alliance. And content produced by the News Alliance is funded in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Support for local and regional news on KSUT also comes from the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority.